The blood-red dawn spilled across the Montana horizon as Rebecca Johnson slung her worn leather satchel over her shoulder, the weight of her meager possessions a reminder of how little she was taking from the life she'd built over the past 6 months. The Rockingham Ranch had been her sanctuary after fleeing Chicago, but a letter from her ailing aunt in San Francisco meant she couldn't stay, no matter how much her heart protested leaving. As she crept across the wooden porch of the ranch house, the floorboards creaked beneath her boots. Rebecca froze, holding her breath, hoping she hadn't woken anyone. She'd left a note on the kitchen table explaining her departure, thanking Isaac Keller and his son for their kindness. A proper goodbye would be too painful. "Miss Rebecca, are you going somewhere?" The small voice startled her. She turned to find 7-year-old Thomas Keller clutching his threadbare stuffed horse, his sandy blonde hair sticking up in all directions, eyes wide with confusion in the early morning light. "Thomas, you should be asleep," Rebecca whispered, setting down her bag. She knelt before the boy who'd stolen her heart these past months, straightening his nightshirt with gentle hands. "Are you leaving us?" His bottom lip quivered. "Please don't go. Pa smiles when you're here." Rebecca's throat tightened. It was true. Isaac Keller, the stoic rancher who'd hired her as a housekeeper and tutor for his son, rarely smiled before she arrived. The loss of his wife 3 years prior had left him a hollow shell of a man, focused only on his ranch and raising his son. Only recently had she seen the ice around his heart beginning to thaw. "I have to go, Thomas. My aunt is very sick, and she needs me," Rebecca explained, brushing the hair from his forehead. "But we need you too," Thomas insisted. "Pa is different when you're here. He laughs and tells stories again. And who's going to teach me my letters?" The door behind them creaked open wider, and Rebecca's heart skipped a beat as Isaac Keller's tall frame filled the doorway. His dark hair was rumpled from sleep, his usually carefully trimmed beard untidy. Even in his disheveled state, the sight of him made her pulse quicken. "Thomas, what are you doing out of bed?" Isaac asked, his voice deep and rough from sleep. Then his eyes fell on Rebecca's satchel, understanding dawning on his rugged face. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question, but a statement filled with quiet resignation. "My aunt in San Francisco is ill," Rebecca explained, rising to her feet. "I received the telegram yesterday. I thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for whom?" Isaac's blue eyes held hers, challenging and wounded all at once. "Please stay, Miss Rebecca," Thomas pleaded again, grabbing her hand. "Just for a little while longer?" Isaac cleared his throat. "Thomas, go inside and get dressed. Miss Johnson has a train to catch." "But Now, son." His tone left no room for argument. Thomas's shoulders slumped as he trudged inside, casting one last desperate look at Rebecca. When they were alone, Rebecca found herself unable to meet Isaac's gaze. "I left a letter explaining everything. The last 6 months working here have been wonderful. Thomas has made such progress with his studies." "Is that all that's been wonderful?" Isaac asked quietly, taking a step toward her. "Just Thomas and his studies?" Rebecca's cheeks flushed. "Mr. Keller, Isaac," he corrected. "After all this time, I think you can call me by my name, Rebecca." The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. "Isaac," she amended. "I have responsibilities. My aunt raised me after my parents died. I owe her everything. And we owe you more than I can express." Isaac ran a hand through his hair. "When Sarah died, I thought all the light went out of this place. Then you came, with your books and your city ways, scolding me for tracking mud on your clean floors." A small smile played at his lips. "You brought life back to this ranch, to Thomas, to me." Rebecca's resolve began to crumble. "The morning stage leaves in an hour. I need to be on it to make the train connection in Helena." Isaac stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap on his skin. "What if I asked you to stay?" "Are you asking?" Rebecca whispered, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Before Isaac could answer, Thomas burst back onto the porch, now fully dressed though his shirt was buttoned incorrectly. "I'm ready. I'm going with Miss Rebecca." Isaac looked down at his son with surprise, then back to Rebecca. The moment had passed, and she felt a sharp pang of disappointment. "Thomas, you can't come with me," Rebecca said gently. "Then you have to stay," the boy insisted, "at least until you teach me how to write in cursive like you promised." Rebecca glanced at Isaac, who was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I suppose I could send a telegram, let my aunt know I'm delayed a few days." Thomas whooped with joy, throwing his arms around her waist. "You're staying!" Over the boy's head, Isaac's eyes met hers. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. "Just a few days," Rebecca cautioned, even as her heart sang at the reprieve, "just until I can make proper arrangements." But as Thomas dragged her back inside, chattering excitedly about their lesson plans, and Isaac followed with her satchel, a small smile playing on his lips, Rebecca wondered if leaving the Rockingham Ranch would ever be as easy as she'd convinced herself it would be. The kitchen was warm and inviting, the heart of the ranch house that had become more of a home to Rebecca than anywhere she'd lived since her parents died. She'd spent countless hours here, cooking meals, teaching Thomas arithmetic at the sturdy oak table, and exchanging increasingly comfortable conversation with Isaac as the months passed. "I'll fix breakfast," Rebecca said, falling into the familiar routine despite her interrupted departure. "Thomas, would you fetch eggs from the hen house?" The boy nodded eagerly and dashed outside, leaving Rebecca alone with Isaac. She busied herself stoking the stove, acutely aware of his presence behind her. "Rebecca." His voice was soft but insistent. "Look at me." She turned, wooden spoon in hand. "This changes nothing. I still need to go to my aunt." "I understand family obligations," Isaac said, leaning against the doorframe. "But I also know that sometimes life offers us unexpected paths." "Is that what I am to you and Thomas? An unexpected path?" Isaac's eyes softened. "When I hired a housekeeper from Chicago, I expected someone older, perhaps a widow, looking for a safe place to live out her days. Instead, I got a fiery, educated woman who challenged me at every turn and brought my son back from the brink of a sorrow too deep for a child to bear." Rebecca swallowed hard. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," Isaac shook his head. "You did what only you could do. Sarah would have liked you." The mention of his late wife hung between them. In 6 months, Isaac had spoken of her only rarely, the wound still too fresh. "I would have liked to know her," Rebecca said softly. "Thomas has her eyes." "Yes," Isaac smiled sadly. "And her spirit. Stubborn as the day is long." The door banged open as Thomas returned with a basket of eggs. "Look how many I got. Enough for a feast." Rebecca laughed, grateful for the interruption. "A feast it shall be then. Go wash your hands." As she prepared breakfast, Rebecca felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. Perhaps a few more days wouldn't hurt. She could write a more detailed letter to her aunt explaining the delay. And deep down, a small, selfish part of her was grateful for the chance to say a proper goodbye to the Kellers, to both of them. The day passed in a blur of normalcy, lessons with Thomas in the morning, bread baking in the afternoon, mending clothes as the evening approached. Isaac spent most of the day out on the range with his men, but returned earlier than usual, his expression unreadable as he watched her setting the table for supper. "Thomas tells me you're only staying a few more days," he said, washing his hands at the basin. Rebecca nodded. "Until the end of the week. That should give you time to find a replacement." Isaac dried his hands slowly, deliberately. "And if I said we don't want a replacement?" Before she could answer, Thomas bounded in from outside. "Pah! Mr. Miller says there's a mountain lion been seen near the east pasture. Can I go with you and the men to track it tomorrow?" Isaac shook his head. "Absolutely not. Mountain lions are dangerous business, son. You'll stay here with Miss Johnson." Thomas's face fell. "But Pa." "No arguments," Isaac said firmly. "Now go wash up for supper." As the boy trudged away, disappointment evident in every step, Rebecca moved closer to Isaac. "Is it really dangerous? The mountain lion?" "It killed 2 calves already," Isaac confirmed. "We need to track it before it gets bolder. I'll be leaving at first light with Miller and the others. Then I'll make sure to pack you provisions, Rebecca said, already mentally planning what food would travel best. Always thinking of others, Isaac murmured. What about what you want, Rebecca? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? In all the time you've been here, you've never once spoken of what you want for yourself. You teach Thomas, you keep this house, you listen to my troubles. But what dreams do you have? Rebecca turned away, busying herself with the stew bubbling on the stove. I wanted to be a teacher once. In a proper school. Why didn't you? Life had other plans, she said simply. My parents died. My aunt took me in, but couldn't afford to send me to college. Then when she fell ill the first time, I had to work to pay for her medicines. Isaac's eyes were soft with understanding. You've sacrificed a lot. We all make choices, Rebecca said, straightening her shoulders. Now, supper is ready. Would you call Thomas? Later that night, after Thomas was asleep, Rebecca sat by the light of an oil lamp, drafting a letter to her aunt. The words came slowly, each one a struggle as she tried to explain her delay without revealing the true reason that leaving the Kellers had proven harder than she ever imagined it would be. A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Isaac standing in the hallway, a small bundle in his hands. I'm sorry to disturb you, he said, but I wanted to give you this before I leave in the morning. Rebecca accepted the package, unwrapping it carefully to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal, its pages crisp and empty. Isaac, this is lovely, but for your thoughts, he explained. You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal before your parents died. I thought perhaps you might want to start again. The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. Thank you. This means more than you know. Isaac nodded, seemingly satisfied with her reaction. Good night, Rebecca. I'll see you when I return. As he turned to go, Rebecca found herself calling after him. Isaac, be careful tomorrow. He looked back, surprised and something warmer in his eyes. I will. Rebecca slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with mountain lions and departing trains. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast and pack provisions for the hunting party. Isaac and his men ate quickly, the mood somber as they discussed their strategy for tracking the predator. As Isaac donned his coat and hat, Rebecca handed him the packed provisions. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Take care out there, she said softly. Keep an eye on Thomas, Isaac replied. He's liable to try and follow us if you don't keep him busy. I'll have him so occupied with lessons he won't have time to think about mountain lions, Rebecca promised. A ghost of a smile touched Isaac's lips. That's what I'm counting on. After the men departed, Rebecca threw herself into the day's work with unusual vigor, determined to keep both Thomas and herself too busy for worrying. They tackled reading and mathematics in the morning, then moved on to science with a nature walk around the ranch yard, carefully staying within sight of the house. Miss Rebecca, Thomas asked as they pressed leaves between the pages of a heavy book, are you really leaving us on Friday? Rebecca hesitated, smoothing a maple leaf with careful fingers. Yes, Thomas. My aunt needs me. But we need you too, the boy insisted. Pa was sad all the time before you came. He doesn't ever cry now. The simple observation squeezed Rebecca's heart. Your father is strong, Thomas. He'll be fine. No, he won't, Thomas said with the certainty only a child could possess. He looks at you the way he used to look at Ma. I remember, Rebecca's hands stilled. Thomas, A gunshot in the distance cut her off. They both turned toward the sound, coming from the eastern hills. That's where Pa went, Thomas said, suddenly alert. Do you think they found the mountain lion? I'm sure that's it, Rebecca said reassuringly, though unease prickled along her spine. Let's finish our project. But more shots followed, then shouting. Rebecca stood, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. In the distance, riders were approaching fast, too fast. Get inside, Thomas, she ordered, suddenly fearful. Now! She hustled the boy into the house just as one of the ranch hands, young Billy Watson, thundered into the yard on a lathered horse. Miss Johnson, he called, dismounting in a rush. Mr. Keller's been hurt. Mountain lion attacked. The men are bringing him in now." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "How bad is it?" Billy's face was grim. "Bad enough. Doc Peterson's been sent for, but he's over at the Jensen place delivering a baby." "Thomas, fetch clean linens and water," Rebecca instructed, falling into the calm efficiency that had seen her through many crises. "Billy, help me clear the kitchen table." By the time the men arrived carrying Isaac on a makeshift stretcher, Rebecca had transformed the kitchen into a makeshift infirmary. Her heart lurched at the sight of Isaac's still form, his shirt torn and bloodied, deep gashes visible on his shoulder and chest. "The cat came out of nowhere," Miller explained as they transferred Isaac to the table. "Got between it and Mr. Keller, but not before it mauled him good. I shot it, but the damage was done." Rebecca cut away Isaac's shirt, assessing the wounds with a steady hand that belied her inner turmoil. "Thomas, go to my room. In the bottom of my trunk, there's a medicine kit with bandages and salves." The boy ran to obey, his face pale with fear. "He's lost a lot of blood," Rebecca murmured, pressing clean cloths against the worst of the gashes. "But the wounds aren't as deep as they could be." "Miller, did the cat's claws get anywhere near his eyes or face?" "No, madam. Mr. Keller got his arm up to protect himself." Rebecca nodded, some of her tension easing. Mountain lion attacks could be deadly, but if the wounds could be cleaned and infection prevented, Isaac stood a chance. For the next several hours, she worked tirelessly, cleaning and bandaging the wounds, applying the herbal salves her grandmother had taught her to make. Thomas stayed nearby, fetching whatever Rebecca needed, his young face set in determined lines. Night had fallen by the time Rebecca felt she'd done all she could. Isaac had been moved to his bed, his breathing steady but shallow, his skin hot with fever. "Will Pa be all right?" Thomas asked, his voice small in the dim room. Rebecca pulled the boy close, his small frame trembling against her. "Your father is strong, Thomas, and stubborn. He won't let a mountain lion keep him down for long." "Promise?" Rebecca hesitated. She'd never been one to make promises she couldn't keep. "I promise I'll do everything I can to help him get better." It seemed to satisfy the boy, who finally allowed himself to be put to bed in his own room. Rebecca returned to Isaac's bedside, dampening a cloth to place on his forehead. In the lamplight, his face looked younger, the lines of worry and responsibility smoothed by unconsciousness. "You can't die," she whispered, taking his hand in hers. "Thomas needs you. This ranch needs you." She swallowed hard. "I need you." The admission, spoken aloud for the first time, even if only to unhearing ears, startled her with its truth. Somewhere between arguments about muddy boots and quiet conversations by the fire, between Thomas's reading lessons and shared laughter over dinner, she had fallen in love with Isaac Keller. And now, just as she'd realized it, she might lose him. Rebecca stayed by Isaac's side through the night, dozing occasionally in the chair beside his bed. Dr. Peterson arrived just before dawn, examining Isaac with practiced hands. "You've done well, Miss Johnson," the elderly physician declared. "Better than I might have done myself. Where did you learn such skills?" "My grandmother was a healer of sorts," Rebecca explained. "She believed in both medicine and herbs. I watched her treat many injuries growing up." "Well, your grandmother taught you well. The wounds are clean, no sign of infection yet. The fever concerns me, but that's to be expected with such trauma." "Will he recover fully?" Rebecca asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Peterson nodded slowly. "With proper care, yes, though it will take time. The muscles in his shoulder are badly torn. He won't be able to work the ranch for some weeks, perhaps months." The implications sank in. A rancher who couldn't work was a rancher who could lose everything. Without Isaac's strength and leadership, the rocking M would be vulnerable. "I'll stay," Rebecca found herself saying. "I'll postpone my trip to San Francisco." The doctor smiled kindly. "That would be a great comfort to both Mr. Keller and young Thomas, I'm sure. Now let me show you how to change these bandages properly." When Isaac finally regained consciousness later that day, His blue eyes were clouded with pain and confusion. "What happened?" he croaked. "You decided to wrestle a mountain lion," Rebecca said, trying for levity as she helped him sip water. "Next time, perhaps choose a less formidable opponent." A weak smile touched his lips. "Thomas? He's fine. Worried about you, but fine. He's been very brave." Isaac's eyes cleared slightly as he focused on her face. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" Rebecca asked softly. "On a train to San Francisco," Isaac murmured. "It's Friday." Rebecca hadn't even realized. In the chaos of the attack and its aftermath, she'd lost track of days. Some things are more important than trains. Isaac's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "Thank you." "Rest now," Rebecca instructed, adjusting his pillows. "Dr. Peterson says you need to rebuild your strength." Over the next week, Isaac's condition improved steadily. The fever broke, the wounds began to heal, and he was able to sit up in bed for short periods. Thomas spent hours at his father's bedside, reading aloud from the books Rebecca had been teaching him with, his chest puffed with pride at each word he conquered. Rebecca wrote a lengthy letter to her aunt, explaining the situation and promising to come as soon as Isaac was well enough. The reply came quickly. Her aunt's condition had stabilized, and she insisted Rebecca stay where she was needed most. "Your young man needs you more than I do right now," the letter concluded, causing Rebecca to blush furiously. She hadn't mentioned any romantic feelings in her letter, but apparently her aunt had read between the lines. With Isaac bedridden, the running of the ranch fell to Miller and the other hands, with Rebecca managing the household and finances. She discovered a talent for bookkeeping she hadn't known she possessed, organizing the ranch's accounts with efficient precision. "You're making me look bad," Isaac commented one evening as he watched her work at his desk, her pen moving swiftly over the ledger. "Miller says the ranch has never run so smoothly." Rebecca glanced up with a smile. "Nonsense. I'm simply following the systems you already had in place." "Liar," Isaac accused without heat. "You've completely reorganized everything. For the better, I might add." She shrugged, unable to deny it. "I like order. Is that so terrible?" "Not terrible at all," Isaac said softly. "In fact, I'm beginning to wonder how we ever managed without you." The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address directly. Rebecca looked back down at the ledger, her cheeks warm. "How's your shoulder feeling today?" she asked, changing the subject. "Better. Doc Peterson says I might try walking to the porch tomorrow." "That's wonderful progress," Rebecca said genuinely. "Thomas will be thrilled. He's been planning to show you the fort he and Billy built behind the barn." Isaac's expression softened at the mention of his son. "He's changed so much since you came. Before he barely spoke, wouldn't engage with his studies. Now he won't stop talking about books and numbers and plants." "He's a bright boy," Rebecca said. "He just needed someone to spark his curiosity." "It's more than that," Isaac insisted. "He needed a mother's touch." Rebecca stilled, the word mother echoing in her mind. "Isaac, I—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Miller stood there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Keller, Miss Johnson, but there's a telegram from town for Miss Johnson." Rebecca accepted the folded paper with a sense of foreboding. Only her aunt would send a telegram, and only in an emergency. Her fears were confirmed as she read the brief message. Her aunt's condition had suddenly worsened. The doctor gave her weeks, perhaps only days. She was asking for Rebecca. "Bad news?" Isaac asked, watching her face. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Your aunt," Isaac guessed. When she nodded again, he sighed heavily. "You need to go to her." "I can't leave you like this," Rebecca protested. "You're still recovering." "And I will continue to recover," Isaac said firmly. "Rebecca, she raised you. You can't ignore her dying wish to see you." Deep down, Rebecca knew he was right. As much as it pained her to leave Isaac and Thomas when they still needed her, she couldn't forsake the woman who had been a mother to her after her parents died. "The morning stage," she said finally. "I'll leave on the morning stage. That will give me time to prepare meals for you and Thomas and go over the accounts with Miller." Isaac nodded, his expression unreadable. Of course. That night, Rebecca packed with a heavy heart. She folded her few dresses carefully, tucking the journal Isaac had given her between the layers of fabric. She'd filled several pages already, mostly with thoughts of the Kellers and the unexpected life she'd found at the Rocking M. A soft knock drew her attention to the door. Thomas stood there in his nightshirt, clutching his stuffed horse. "Are you leaving again?" he asked, his voice small. Rebecca knelt before him. "Yes, Thomas, my aunt is very sick, and she's asking for me." "But Pa's still sick too," Thomas protested. "Your father's getting better every day," Rebecca assured him. "And you've been such a wonderful helper. You'll need to continue being brave while I'm gone. Will you come back?" The hope in his voice nearly broke her heart. Rebecca hesitated. She wanted to say yes, to promise this remarkable child that she would return to the home and family she'd come to love. But the future held too many uncertainties. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I hope so." Thomas's face crumpled. "That's what Ma said before she went to heaven, that she hoped she'd come back." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes as she pulled the boy into a tight embrace. "Oh, Thomas, this isn't like that. Your mother was very ill. I'm just going to take care of my aunt. It's different." "Promise you won't forget us?" Thomas asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I could never forget you," Rebecca vowed. "Never." After tucking Thomas back into bed, Rebecca returned to her packing, each item a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. Again. Dawn came too quickly. Rebecca rose early, preparing a hearty breakfast and setting out detailed instructions for meals and household tasks. Thomas was sullen and quiet, pushing his food around his plate rather than eating it. "I've made your favorite cookies," Rebecca told him. "They're in the tin on the top shelf. One after lessons, remember?" Thomas nodded wordlessly. Isaac had insisted on getting out of bed to see her off, despite her protests. He sat at the kitchen table, his complexion still pale, but his eyes clear and determined. "The stage will be here soon," Rebecca said, glancing out the window at the pink-tinged sky. "I should get my bags." "I'll help," Isaac said, starting to rise. "Absolutely not," Rebecca scolded. "Dr. Peterson said no lifting. I can manage." She retreated to her room, gathering her courage along with her luggage. This goodbye would be harder than she'd imagined, even with the promise she'd made to herself to return if possible after her aunt's passing. As she stepped onto the porch, bags in hand, the scene was hauntingly familiar. The blood-red sunrise, the cool morning air, the weight of departure heavy on her shoulders. But this time, Isaac and Thomas stood waiting. No surprise in their eyes, only sadness. "The stage should be here any minute," Rebecca said unnecessarily, setting down her bags. Thomas suddenly rushed forward, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Please stay, Miss Rebecca. Pa smiles when you're here." Rebecca looked up at Isaac, whose eyes held emotions too complex to name. "Thomas," she began gently, "we talked about this. I have to go to my aunt." "I know," the boy mumbled, "but you have to come back. Promise." Before Rebecca could answer, the sound of approaching hooves announced the arrival of the stage. It rumbled into view, dust billowing behind it. "It's time," Isaac said quietly. Rebecca knelt to hug Thomas properly. "Be good for your father. Keep up with your studies." "I will," Thomas promised, tears tracking down his cheeks. The stage rolled to a stop at the end of the lane. The driver called out, "Helena stage! 5 minutes!" Rebecca turned to Isaac, who stood straight despite the pain she knew he must be feeling. "Thank you for understanding," she said softly. "I understand duty to family better than most," Isaac replied, "though I admit I had hoped—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Hoped what?" Rebecca pressed, suddenly desperate to hear the words. Isaac's eyes met hers, intense and honest. "I had hoped you might consider us your family too." Rebecca's breath caught. "Isaac!" "Last call for Helena," the driver shouted. "You should go," Isaac said, stepping back. "Your aunt is waiting." Rebecca nodded, tears threatening. She picked up her bags and walked toward the stage, each step heavier than the last. The driver took her luggage, offering a hand to help her board. As she settled into her seat, Rebecca looked back at the pair standing on the porch, the tall, proud rancher and the small boy clutching his hand. They had become her world in a way she never expected. The driver climbed up, taking the reins. "Ready, miss?" Rebecca's gaze locked with Isaac's across the distance. In his eyes, she saw everything he hadn't said, longing, respect, and something deeper that mirrored her own feelings. "Miss?" the driver prompted again. "No," Rebecca said suddenly. "No, I'm not ready." Before she could reconsider, she was climbing down from the stage, retrieving her bags from the confused driver. "Changed your mind?" he asked. "I need to send a telegram first," Rebecca explained. "I'll catch tomorrow's stage." The driver shrugged. "Suit yourself, miss." As the stage pulled away, Rebecca turned back to the ranch house. Isaac and Thomas remained frozen on the porch, disbelief written across their features. Rebecca walked steadily toward them, her decision solidifying with each step. When she reached the porch, she set down her bags and looked up at Isaac. "One telegram," she said, "to tell my aunt I'm bringing my family with me to San Francisco, if you're willing." Isaac's face transformed, hope blooming like a desert flower after rain. "You mean that?" Rebecca nodded. "I love you, Isaac Keller. You and Thomas both. I was a fool to think I could leave you behind." Isaac reached for her, drawing her into a careful embrace, mindful of his injuries. "I've loved you since you scolded me for tracking mud on your clean floor," he murmured against her hair. "I was just too stubborn to admit it." Thomas wriggled between them, his face alight with joy. "Does this mean you're staying forever, Miss Rebecca?" Rebecca laughed through her tears. "It means we're all going to San Francisco to see my aunt, and after that we'll come home. Together." "Together," Isaac repeated, his eyes never leaving hers. "I like the sound of that." 3 weeks later, Rebecca stood on the deck of a steamship entering San Francisco Bay, the wind whipping her hair as she pointed out landmarks to an awestruck Thomas. "Look at the ships," the boy exclaimed, leaning dangerously far over the railing until Isaac pulled him back with his good arm. "Careful, son," Isaac cautioned. "I think your Aunt Eleanor would prefer to meet you dry and in one piece." Rebecca smiled at the mention of her aunt, whose condition had stabilized once again according to the latest telegram. The doctor now believed she might have months rather than weeks, a blessing Rebecca attributed to the news that she was bringing her newfound family to San Francisco. "She's going to adore both of you," Rebecca said confidently, "though she'll likely scold you for getting mauled by a mountain lion, Isaac." Isaac chuckled, his arm around Rebecca's waist. "I'll accept the scolding gladly if it means winning her approval." "You already have it," Rebecca assured him. "She called you my young man in her letter, remember?" A flush crept up Isaac's neck, visible even beneath his beard. "I'm hardly young anymore." "You're younger than you were before I met you," Rebecca teased. "According to Thomas, you've grown positively childish, smiling all the time." Isaac's expression softened as he gazed at her. "I have reason to smile." The steamship docked with much commotion, passengers gathering their belongings and preparing to disembark. Rebecca led Isaac and Thomas through the bustling crowd, hiring a carriage to take them to her aunt's home in the quieter western part of the city. Eleanor Johnson's house was a modest Victorian, well-maintained but showing signs of the financial difficulties Rebecca knew her aunt had faced in recent years. The garden, once her aunt's pride, was overgrown with weeds, the flowers struggling amongst the neglect. "It's been hard for her to maintain it since she became ill," Rebecca explained as they approached the front door. "Perhaps we can help restore it while we're here." A young maid answered their knock, her eyes widening at the sight of Rebecca. "Miss Johnson, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "We caught an earlier steamship," Rebecca explained. "Is my aunt well enough for visitors?" "Oh yes, miss. She's been talking of nothing else but your arrival for days. And these must be—" The maid trailed off, looking curiously at Isaac and Thomas. "My fiancé, Mr. Isaac Keller, and his son Thomas," Rebecca introduced them, the word fiancé still new and thrilling on her tongue. Isaac had proposed during their journey, presenting her with his late wife's ring, which Thomas had secretly packed before their departure. The maid ushered them into a comfortable sitting room, promising to inform Eleanor of their arrival. Minutes later, a thin, elegant woman entered, supported by a walking cane but otherwise appearing stronger than Rebecca had feared. "Rebecca," Eleanor Johnson breathed, opening her arms. "My dear girl." Rebecca embraced her aunt carefully, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "Aunt Eleanor, you look much better than I expected." "Dramatic doctors?" Eleanor scoffed. "Always predicting doom. I decided I couldn't possibly die before meeting this mysterious rancher who stole my niece's heart." She turned her keen gaze on Isaac. "You must be Mr. Keller." Isaac stepped forward, hat in hand. "Madam, it's a pleasure to meet you. Rebecca has told me much about your kindness and wisdom." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Handsome and diplomatic. I approve already." Her gaze softened as it fell on Thomas. "And this young gentleman must be Thomas." The boy nodded shyly. "Yes, madam, Miss Rebecca taught me to read." "Did she now? Well, I have a library full of books that need a good reader. Perhaps you'd like to see them later?" Thomas's eyes lit up. "Yes, please." Eleanor smiled, then turned back to Rebecca. "Now, tell me everything, and don't leave out any details. Particularly about that rather impressive bandage I can see peeking out from beneath Mr. Keller's collar." Over tea and cakes, Rebecca recounted the events of the past months, from her work at the Rocking M to Isaac's injury and their decision to come to San Francisco together. Eleanor listened attentively, her sharp eyes missing nothing, especially the loving glances exchanged between Rebecca and Isaac. "So you plan to marry before returning to Montana?" Eleanor clarified when Rebecca finished her tale. "Yes," Rebecca confirmed. "If you're well enough to attend the ceremony, we thought perhaps next week, at the little church down the street." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Eleanor declared, "though I must insist you stay here until the wedding. We have plenty of room, and it would give me time to know my future grandnephew better." She winked at Thomas, who beamed at the prospect. "That's very generous," Isaac said, "but we wouldn't want to impose, especially given your health." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. Having you all here will be the best medicine possible. Besides, Rebecca tells me you're still recovering yourself, Mr. Keller. I suspect we can convalesce together quite companionably." And so it was decided. The following days took on a peaceful rhythm, with Rebecca dividing her time between caring for her aunt and planning the small wedding. Isaac's strength returned rapidly in the mild coastal climate, and he set about restoring Eleanor's neglected garden with Thomas's enthusiastic assistance. "Your young man has quite the green thumb," Eleanor observed one afternoon as they watched Isaac teaching Thomas how to prune rose bushes. "I haven't seen my garden look so tidy in years." "He's good with growing things," Rebecca agreed. "The Rockingham has the finest vegetable garden in the county thanks to him." "And he's clearly a wonderful father," Eleanor continued. "Thomas is a delight, well-mannered and curious, a credit to both his parents." Rebecca's heart warmed at the inclusion of herself in that assessment. "Sarah, Isaac's first wife, laid a strong foundation. I'm just building upon it." Eleanor studied her niece carefully. "You don't give yourself enough credit, my dear. That boy looks at you as if you hung the moon, and his father looks at you with even greater adoration, if that's possible." Rebecca blushed. "I never expected to find love, especially not in the wilds of Montana." "Love finds us when and where we least expect it," Eleanor said wisely. "Just as it found me with your Uncle George, God rest his soul. We had only 10 years together, but they were the happiest of my life." She patted Rebecca's hand. "I'm glad you won't be alone after I'm gone." "Please don't speak that way," Rebecca protested. "The doctor says you're improving." "For now," Eleanor acknowledged, "but we must be realistic, my dear. I'm an old woman, and my heart is weak. What matters is that I'll go peacefully knowing you're loved and cared for." Rebecca blinked back tears. "I love you, Aunt Eleanor." "And I you, child. Now, enough melancholy. Tell me more about this wedding dress you're having made. Is it terribly fashionable?" The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a rarity in foggy San Francisco. Rebecca stood before the mirror in her aunt's guest room, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back. The dress was simple but elegant, ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was swept up with pearl pins, a small bouquet of roses from Eleanor's garden in her hands. A knock at the door preceded Eleanor's entrance. Despite the doctor's warnings about overexertion, she had insisted on helping Rebecca prepare. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, her eyes misting, "like your mother on her wedding day." "Do I?" Rebecca asked softly. Her memories of her parents had faded with time. "The very image," Eleanor confirmed. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." "As am I." A second knock interrupted the emotional moment. Thomas peeked in, resplendent in a new suit, his hair slicked down with water in a valiant attempt to tame his cowlicks. "Pa sent me to check if you're ready," he announced. "He's getting nervous." Rebecca laughed. "Tell your father I haven't changed my mind if that's what he's worried about." Thomas grinned. "I will. You look really pretty, Miss Rebecca." He hesitated. "After today, what should I call you?" "You won't be Miss Rebecca anymore." The question caught Rebecca off guard. She and Isaac had discussed many aspects of their future together, but this particular detail hadn't arisen. "What would you like to call me?" she asked gently. Thomas scuffed his shoe against the carpet, suddenly shy. Would it be all right if I called you Ma? Not right away, maybe, but someday?" Rebecca's heart overflowed. She knelt before the boy, heedless of her dress. "Thomas, I would be honored to be your Ma, whenever you feel ready." Thomas threw his arms around her neck. "I think I'm ready now." Eleanor discreetly wiped away a tear as she watched the exchange. "I believe we have a wedding to attend," she reminded them, "and a very anxious groom waiting." The ceremony was simple and deeply moving. Isaac stood tall and handsome at the altar, his eyes never leaving Rebecca as she walked toward him on Eleanor's arm. Thomas stood proudly beside his father, the rings secured carefully in his pocket. When Rebecca reached them, Isaac took her hands in his. "You're the most beautiful sight I've ever seen," he whispered. "Even more than Montana at sunrise," Rebecca teased. "Even more than that," Isaac confirmed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The minister's words flowed over them, ancient promises given new life as they pledged themselves to one another. When Thomas presented the rings, his face solemn with the importance of his task, Rebecca felt her heart might burst with love for both Keller men. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "Mr. Keller, you may kiss your bride." Isaac needed no further invitation. His kiss was gentle but full of promise, drawing a few chuckles from the small gathering of friends Eleanor had invited to witness the ceremony. The celebration afterward was lively despite its small size. Eleanor, though tiring visibly, insisted on remaining for the entire affair, beaming with approval as she watched the newlyweds. "When do you return to Montana?" one guest inquired over cake and punch. "In 2 weeks," Isaac answered. "The ranch needs attention before winter sets in." "And will you be joining them, Eleanor?" another guest asked. A hush fell over the gathering. Rebecca and Isaac exchanged glances, having discussed this very question privately. "Actually," Rebecca said, "we're hoping Aunt Eleanor will consider making her home with us, at least for a time. The Montana air might do wonders for her health." Eleanor looked startled. "My dear, I couldn't possibly impose—" "It's not an imposition," Isaac insisted. "We have plenty of room, and Rebecca would feel better having you nearby rather than worrying from a distance." "Please, Aunt Eleanor," Thomas added his plea, "I could read to you every day and show you all my favorite places." Eleanor's resistance visibly wavered. "Well, when you put it that way, perhaps a trial visit? For a month or 2. Rebecca beamed, knowing her aunt's pride would never allow her to admit how much the invitation meant to her. "Wonderful. We'll start packing tomorrow." Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Thomas had fallen asleep, exhausted by the day's excitement, Rebecca and Isaac stood together on the back porch of Eleanor's house, gazing at the stars barely visible through the city's glow. "Are you happy, Mrs. Keller?" Isaac asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Rebecca answered truthfully. though I'm not sure how Thomas will adjust to having both an aunt and a new mother under the same roof." Isaac chuckled, his breath warm against her neck. "Thomas will be in heaven. 2 women to dote on him instead of 1. He'll be thoroughly spoiled." "Eleanor might surprise you," Rebecca warned. "She can be quite strict when it comes to manners and education." "Good. The boy could use a little extra discipline. I've been too soft on him since Sarah died." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. "You've been exactly what he needed, loving and constant. The rest we'll figure out together." "Together," Isaac agreed, kissing her softly. "I like that word more every time I hear it." 2 weeks later, they boarded a train bound for Montana. Eleanor settled comfortably in a private compartment with Thomas as her self-appointed attendant. The boy had taken to his great-aunt with surprising devotion, enchanted by her stories of San Francisco in its wilder days. "Do you think they'll be all right in there?" Rebecca asked as she and Isaac found their own seats in the adjoining compartment. "I think your aunt is enjoying having a captive audience almost as much as Thomas is enjoying her stories," Isaac replied. "We might not see either of them until Denver." Rebecca laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder as the train lurched into motion. "Thank you for suggesting we bring her with us. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her alone again." "Family belongs together," Isaac said simply. "Besides, the ranch house has been too quiet for too long. It will be good to fill it with more laughter and conversation." "And arguments over the proper way to make tea," Rebecca predicted. "Eleanor has very definite opinions on brewing times." "I look forward to being thoroughly educated on the subject," Isaac said dryly. As the train gathered speed, carrying them toward home, Rebecca reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. 6 months ago, she had arrived at the Rockingham Ranch, expecting nothing more than employment and a roof over her head. Instead, she had found love, family, and a purpose she'd never dared dream of. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How close I came to leaving," Rebecca admitted. "That morning when Thomas caught me sneaking away at sunrise. If he hadn't woken up—" "He has a gift for timing," Isaac agreed. "Though I like to think I would have come after you eventually. Once I worked up the courage." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "The man who faces down mountain lions was afraid to tell a schoolteacher he had feelings for her?" "Mountain lions are predictable compared to women," Isaac defended himself. "Especially educated, strong-willed women from Chicago." "Well, this educated, strong-willed woman is very glad you found your courage," Rebecca said, reaching up to touch his cheek, "even if it took a near-death experience to bring it about." "Some lessons I learned the hard way," Isaac admitted, "but I learned them well." He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I won't waste another moment being afraid to tell you how much I love you, Rebecca Keller." "I should hope not," Rebecca murmured as he leaned down to kiss her properly. "We have a lifetime of moments ahead of us." The Rockingham Ranch welcomed them home with golden autumn light bathing the valley. The ranch hands had assembled to greet them, hats in hand, curious about the elegant older woman accompanying their boss and his new wife. Miller stepped forward, offering a hand to help Eleanor from the wagon. "Welcome to the Rockingham, madam. We've prepared the guest room just as Mrs. Keller instructed." "How efficient," Eleanor approved, surveying the ranch with keen interest. Rebecca didn't exaggerate the beauty of this place. Thomas jumped down, eager to show his great-aunt everything. "Wait until you see the horses, Aunt Eleanor, and the creek where we catch fish, and the hills where the wildflowers grow in spring." "One thing at a time, young man," Eleanor cautioned, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "I'm not as spry as I once was." As Thomas led Eleanor toward the house, Rebecca hung back with Isaac, drinking in the familiar sight of the ranch, her home now in truth as well as feeling. "It hasn't changed a bit," she observed. "And yet everything has changed," Isaac replied, his arm around her waist. "For the better." That night, after a celebratory dinner prepared by the ranch cook in honor of their return and marriage, Rebecca stood on the porch watching the moon rise over the eastern hills. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, the stars impossibly bright away from the city lights. Isaac joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the chill. Thomas is reading to your aunt. I think they've both found their match in stubbornness. Neither will admit they're tired enough for bed. Rebecca smiled. They're getting along better than I dared hope. I was worried the journey would be too much for her, but she seems stronger every day. Montana has a way of strengthening people, Isaac observed, or revealing the strength that was always there. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, enjoying the peaceful night. Do you ever miss Chicago? Isaac asked suddenly. The theaters, the shops, the conveniences of city life? Rebecca considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss certain aspects, bookstores especially. But no, I don't miss the life I had there. It was lonely, despite being surrounded by people. Here, she gestured to the ranch spread out before them. Here I found what I was looking for without even knowing I was searching. And what was that? Isaac asked softly. Purpose, belonging. She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Love. Isaac drew her close, his kiss a promise of all the days and nights to come. When they finally parted, Rebecca rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What happens now? She asked. Now? Isaac's voice rumbled beneath her ear. Now we live our life together. We raise Thomas, care for your aunt, run the ranch. We face whatever comes, good or bad, side by side. Side by side, Rebecca repeated. I like that plan. From inside the house came the sound of laughter. Thomas and Eleanor, still engaged in their battle of wills over bedtime. The sound wrapped around Rebecca like a warm embrace, completing the sense of homecoming. 3 years later, Rebecca sat in the shade of the oak tree beside the ranch house, watching Thomas teach his little sister how to ride her pony. At 10, Thomas had grown tall and confident, taking his role as big brother seriously. 2-year-old Sarah, named for the mother she would never know, bounced excitedly in the saddle, her dark curls flying as Thomas led the pony in a careful circle. Not too fast, Rebecca called, shifting the infant in her arms to a more comfortable position. 6-week-old James slept peacefully, untroubled by his sister's enthusiastic shrieks. We're being careful, Ma, Thomas assured her. Daisy's the gentlest pony in Montana. Rebecca smiled at the easy way he called her Ma now. The transition having happened so naturally, neither of them remembered exactly when it began. Eleanor emerged from the house, moving slowly but steadily with her cane. The Montana air had indeed worked wonders for her health, though age continued its inevitable march. Those children will wear out that poor pony, she observed, settling into the chair beside Rebecca. Better the pony than us, Rebecca replied with a laugh. Though Thomas is a tremendous help with both of them, I don't know what I'd do without him. He's growing into a fine young man, Eleanor agreed. A credit to all his parents, those here, and the one watching from above. Rebecca nodded, touched by the acknowledgement of Sarah's continued presence in their family story. She and Isaac made sure Thomas never forgot his birth mother, keeping her memory alive through stories and the small keepsakes she'd left behind. Where is that husband of yours? Eleanor inquired. Surely the cattle can spare him for lunch. He promised to be back by noon, Rebecca said, glancing at the sun's position, which means any minute now. As if summoned by her words, Isaac appeared on horseback, riding in from the eastern pasture. He dismounted with the easy grace that had returned after months of painful recovery and rehabilitation following the mountain lion attack. Thomas waved excitedly. Pa! Look at Sarah on her pony! Isaac approached, pride evident in his face as he watched his daughter. A natural horsewoman, just like her mother. Hardly, Rebecca protested. I still prefer a comfortable carriage to horseback. Only because you haven't given riding a proper chance, Isaac teased, leaning down to kiss her before carefully taking the sleeping baby from her arms. How's my son today? Hungry every 2 hours and growing like a weed, Rebecca reported. Dr. Peterson says he's the healthiest baby he's seen in years. Isaac beamed, gazing down at the infant with undisguised wonder. Even after 3 children, the miracle of new life still moved him deeply. I invited the Millers for Sunday dinner, Eleanor announced. That wife of his makes an excellent apple pie, and I intend to wheedle the recipe out of her once and for all. Isaac and Rebecca exchanged amused glances. Eleanor had integrated herself thoroughly into ranch life, forming friendships with neighboring families and organizing social events that had breathed new vitality into the community. "You're incorrigible, Aunt Eleanor," Rebecca said fondly. "At my age, I've earned the right to be," Eleanor retorted. As they gathered for lunch on the shaded porch, Rebecca looked around at the family they'd created. Thomas helping Sarah with her food, Eleanor regaling Isaac with the latest town gossip, baby James sleeping contentedly in his cradle. The ranch flourished under their combined care, the house filled with the laughter and occasional tears that marked a life fully lived. That evening, after the children were asleep and Eleanor had retired to her room with a new novel, Rebecca and Isaac stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you remember the sunrise the day you almost left?" Isaac asked, his arm around her waist. "How could I forget?" Rebecca replied. "It was blood red like a warning." "And now look at this sunset," Isaac mused. "All gold and promise." Rebecca leaned into him, grateful beyond words for the life they had built together. Who would have thought a young boy's plea could change so many lives? "He knew what I was too afraid to say," Isaac admitted. "That I smiled when you were here, that you brought light back into our home." "And you gave me a home when I'd never truly had one," Rebecca said softly. "Even with my parents, and later with Eleanor, I always felt unsettled, as if I were waiting for something." "And were you? Waiting for something?" Rebecca looked up at him, her heart full. "I was waiting for you, for Thomas, for this family we've created." Isaac kissed her tenderly as the last rays of the sun gilded the valley. "Then I'm glad you stayed that morning." "So am I," Rebecca whispered against his lips. "So am I." As darkness settled over the rocking M, stars appearing one by one in the vast Montana sky, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened young woman fleeing at sunrise to a wife, mother, and rancher firmly rooted in the land and people she loved, life had presented her with choices, and though the path hadn't always been clear, each decision had led her home. Thomas had been right that fateful morning. His father did smile when she was here. And now, surrounded by the family they had built together, Rebecca smiled too, not just in moments of joy, but in the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.